let's bring in Greg Cosell to the conversation. His appearance on the show is presented by Scott Lawnyard, an official commercial site work partner of the Buffalo Bills. And Greg, how you doing today? Thanks for coming on to talk a little shop, talk a little ball with us.
Hi, Maddie. How are you?
Doing good. We're getting ready for a Saturday night game. I kind of feel lucky that we are one of 6 teams who don't have to play on Christmas Eve or Christmas. That allows us to have a couple of days off, and also the players, because if you're playing on Christmas Eve or Christmas, you're kind of knocking both of those days out.
Yeah, it's a huge distraction. I got it. Greg, before we get into this game, Greg, let me ask you about last week's game against Dallas.
Oh, you got to talk about last week's game, Steve. I mean, it was so special in so many ways, but go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. The Bills dominated up front. Their offensive line played an extremely efficient game. James Cook went off. Why don't games because Dallas just didn't seem built to stop a team like that. How's come you don't see games like this more often?
Yeah. Well, it's funny you say that, and obviously you know this. Football is a physical game, so obviously if you run the ball well, guys are blocking well up front. But I got to tell you, I watched that tape really slowly and carefully, and I was really impressed from a tactical perspective with what they did in the run game. I mean, like I said, you run the ball, you got to block people, and they did that, no question. But I just thought that they had such a good feel for the fronts of the Cowboys, because that's ultimately – I would have loved to have been involved in the meeting when they first decided early in the week that, hey, we believe this is how we can win and defeat the Cowboys defense. I would have loved to have known what the thought process was, because it was tactical to me as much as physical. When you decide on a run game, you're not just saying, okay, let's go beat the crap out of them. You're saying, hey, these are the fronts they play. These are the runs that work best against these fronts. These are the ways we're going to block those fronts. Steve, you know all this from when you played. It's not just, hey, let's go hit them in the mouth. And I just thought that they had such a great feel for the fronts and how they wanted to block them that it was tactical as well as physical.
And Joe Brady admitted later in the week when we talked to him on Monday after the game, he said, I didn't plan to run the ball as much as we did, but we were having so much success with it that we just kept doing it. And you heard after the game, the offensive players, Josh Allen, Sean McDermott, saying kudos to Joe for sticking to it, for keeping on running the ball when he could have gone to what else they had planned, but they decided to go with what was working. How difficult do you think that is for an offensive coordinator to have all these things that you might want to go to within a game, but you find one thing that's working, and maybe you put your pride aside a little bit and say, hey, this is working for us. We're not going to leave it.
Well, I guess, Maddie, theoretically it shouldn't be difficult, but I know it can be. But, just to, I think I can paint a pretty visual picture, I hope anyway, just to dig into the weeds a little bit, because I think it's really important given what happened last week. The Cowboys played what we call predominantly an over front, meaning their front was shifted to the strength of the offense, where the side the tight end was on. And they just really attacked that front consistently in the first half, and the Cowboys really made no adjustment until the second half. And obviously by then, the Bills were controlling the game clearly, but they just had such a good feel for running the kinds of runs that would work against that front. And I think that's one reason that they did the little motion hop with Cook, which happened 8 times in the game for 55 yards. They ran their staple run, that tackle trap. We've seen them run that all year long. They ran it with Dawkins as the puller. They ran it with Brown as the puller. So they just, tactically, I thought it was a masterpiece, and stay with it. If it's working, stay with it. The other thing too is that eats clock. And while the Cowboys clearly did not have their best offensive game, we know they can score a lot. And if you're eating clock and scoring touchdowns, I don't think there's any offensive coach that would say that's a bad idea.
Right. And what do you make of the fact, too, that I was looking at the stat, I think I got it right. Predominantly, the Cowboys played dime defense against the Bills with 6 DBs, and they never really went heavy, like to just overreact and like stop the run at all costs. They never really decided to do that, at least personnel-wise.
Yeah, well, believe it or not, Steve, it's actually because I notice the same thing with a lot of these websites. They really play nickel because what these websites do is they count Bell number 14 as a safety, and he's a linebacker.
Yeah, they
So
come,
they
he's a
really
linebacker. Yeah.
he's a linebacker, right? I
Right.
mean, the size suggests he's a safety, and that's what he played in college. But he's a linebacker, so they were really playing 4-2-5 nickel most of the game.
Right.
And it's interesting. We were talking about Bell because he is the weak side linebacker, the weak side stack backer. So when they ran to the weak side of the over front, he was the linebacker to that side, and he's obviously a smaller player, and he doesn't hold up real well against the run. So that was another byproduct of running against the defensive front of the Cowboys that it became Bell. We're obviously watching the Cook touchdown now, the pass, which was a great call too, because they actually had, it was man coverage, and they actually had two wide receivers to the right, and they just ran, what you call Dino, two post routes to clear out the whole area, and then get Cook matched up on the linebacker Clark, and
Right. Clark is a linebacker. He's a bigger linebacker. They didn't hop the back on, or maybe they did, but they hopped it the other way and put Cook to the side of Clark and left him on him, and that was a spot where they got him again with a matchup where instead of having a safety-size linebacker on Cook, they had the linebacker-size linebacker on Cook.
Well, I think that hop was intentional because of the route concept to that side of the field. They cleared out that side with the two post routes, and they wanted Cook matched on the linebacker. So that to me was a called play just outside the red zone, knowing what coverage they would get, because the Cowboys are a high percentage man-to-man coverage team.
And after what you saw the Bills did against the Cowboys and this run game that they got going, I know defenses are different that you're playing. They're going to show different things, show different fronts. But do you think there's anything they can glean from this game and use moving forward with the success they were able to find there?
Well, to me, we all know that the next game is not going to have Josh Allen throwing 15 times. That's not going to happen. We know that.
Right.
That doesn't mean he's going to drop back 45 times, but he's not going to throw 15 balls. So, to me, the next step, and again, this is just me talking, these coaches know way more than I do. They're with the players every day. They're doing just the Bills and their opponent, 16 hours a day. I'm not. But what I would love to see now is a really strong marrying and synchronicity between the run game looks and the play action element in the pass game. Because I think now that you've seen how they run the football, whether it's with that staple tackle trap or whether it's zone, whatever the run concepts are, if you can really marry that look with your pass game, your play action pass game, that puts defenders in conflict, because there's always defenders who have both a run and a pass responsibility on every play, and you want to put those guys in conflict. So, ideally, that's the next step. And then you get cleaner, easier reads for Josh Allen, and then you get more receivers involved, and then your offense continues to take that next step instead of just relying on, hey, Josh Allen make a great throw, Josh Allen run around. It becomes all rhythmic, and that's what you're trying to get accomplished in the pass game.
And this game is a different kind of matchup too, because the Chargers give up a ton of pass yardage.
Yeah.
And so it's almost as enticing as running against the Cowboys is to come out throwing it against this team. So that's got to play into the game plan. Yeah,
and by the way, it's funny you say that, because if they came out throwing it in this game, a lot of people might automatically say, "Oh, what are they doing? They ran it so well." But you play against your opponent, and Steve, you're right. They're not a very good pass defense at all. And, this might be a week where they do come out throwing the ball. Look, how they want this game to play out. We all know this. They want to be ahead 21-3 or whatever it is in the middle of the second quarter against a rookie quarterback. And give Easton Stick credit. I watched that full tape last week, to prepare to talk to you guys. To be honest, I may not have watched Easton Stick if it wasn't for the fact that they were playing the Bills this week. But I got to give him a ton of credit, because that game was out of hand quickly. and he stayed in there. He's not a highly talented guy in terms of arm talent. This touchdown we're seeing now is a bust. But the point is that in the fourth quarter, he actually made his best throws. He stayed in there. He played with poise and composure. He's just not very big, and he doesn't have a big arm. But he's going to be the quarterback. And you know what? The likelihood is he'll be better this week than he was last week. Now, that's a relative term. He's not going to be a top 5 quarterback in the league this week, but he'll be better because he played a game. He has another full week of practice. So, the guess is he'll be better. Now, the odd thing about watching their tape was their offensive line, and particularly the left tackle, Slater, who's normally a really good player, he had a lot of problems in one-on-one pass protection, and that really surprised me.
And looking at their offense and what they have going for them, I mean, no Keenan Allen in this game. What matchups are you looking at for the Bills' defense? Is there anywhere on the offense for the Chargers that may give the Bills a tough time on defense? Is it the matchup between the linebackers, Bills linebackers, and Austin Eckler? Is there somewhere else we should be watching on Saturday?
So you're talking on which side of the ball, Maddie, now?
On the Chargers' offensive side of the ball. Yeah, Chargers offense against the Buffalo Bills defense. Is there anywhere within the Chargers offense that you think could give the Bills defense some problems?
Yeah, the one thing you cannot allow to happen in this game is vertical throws over the top. That's the way they can stay in the game, and they have speed at wide receiver. The rookie Johnston, who's incredibly raw and unrefined and not a very good receiver at this point, he can run, and he's a strider. Guyton can run. Palmer can run. So the last thing you want to have happen in a game like this is all of a sudden, they hit a 60-yard touchdown, and now you're in the middle of the second quarter, and it's a 10-7 game. Because then all of a sudden, what people have to remember, and Steve can speak to this way better than I. He played and he knows it's an NFL team, okay? It's easy to say they stink. It's easy to say Easton Stick is a backup quarterback who's probably never going to be a full-time starter. They just changed coaches. I mean, all that's easy to say, but it's still an NFL team with NFL players. And we've seen a lot worse. You can't go into this game with the assumption that, hey, by halftime we're ahead 31-3 and we can walk through the second half. You got to come out and you want to bury them early. And you just can't give up big play touchdowns because those receivers can run and they can get on top of you.
Yeah, and that's really the balance you have to strike. We talked about this early in the week on the show, Greg, because certainly the Bills want to go out there, strike fast, get them down, make them think it's going to be another 63-21 game, get them to fold up their tent early. But to do that, you got to put the ball at risk. And the one way you can keep a team in the game is to turn it over. So if you come out and you do throw it 90% of the time in the first half because they do have a bad or statistically bad pass defense, you're going to put the ball at risk and run the risk of giving it to them. So that balance has to be struck. Although I'll sit here and be the first to tell you, I always tell coaches or complain in this seat about coaches who don't trust their players. So you got Josh Allen. My thought is to do that. Go out there, put it in the hands of your best players, and turn them loose and see if that other team can keep up.
And my sense is, guys, I think they're going to do that. And, we could be wrong, Steve. You never know. I mean, we're just two guys talking ball, and Maddie, three of us talking ball here. We don't know. We're not in the meetings. We're not game planning. But I personally think that they're going to be aggressive in this game. Now, we know when they're aggressive, Josh can, at times he might throw into the other team. That's okay. I don't think that affects him. I think he just plays. I think that's the way he is. That's just innate to him. He just plays. He's such a confident player that I don't think after an interception, he sulks on the sideline. So I think you just have to play the way you think is best against this opponent. And you're right. They are really poor in pass defense. And you'd like to be able to throw the ball and hit some bigger plays. And, all of a sudden, like I said, be up 21-3 in the second quarter, and then not that it's a walk home after that, but the whole game becomes different.
Right.
And one thing they do have going for themselves, the Chargers, that is, on defense, they've got Khalil Mack, who has 15 sacks. They rank top 10 in amount of sacks they have, which is 44, good for 6th in the NFL. So they have been successful at getting to the quarterback at times. What does the offensive line need to do to make sure that Khalil Mack doesn't spoil their plans? They had Micah Parsons last week, and Micah Parsons got hurt in the beginning of the game, still played through everything, but was off the field for a little bit there. But it didn't seem like Micah Parsons took away from what the Bills had going on offense. So how can they do that for 2 straight weeks going against another good pass rusher in Khalil Mack?
Yeah, and Maddie, last week there weren't really pass rushes because of the way the game played out.
Right.
So Parsons, the entire D line of the Cowboys, which is overall better than the entire D line of the Chargers, was not a factor simply because the game didn't play out that way. I mean, they didn't really have to throw. There weren't a lot of 3rd and longs or long yardage situations in which they had to throw the football. So, Mack's a great pass rusher, and obviously he can win against anybody. So now it comes down to how you choose to play. Ideally, you're not going to get into too many 3rd and longs. We know, though, Josh can move, and he will move. So you would think that Mack would not be a huge factor, but he's such a great player that he certainly can be, and he certainly can win one-on-one against anybody. That's another thing. Steve talked about turnovers, Maddie, but you also don't want negative plays. Mm-hmm. I mean, you're better off in this game, I don't want to say punting the ball, but you don't want to get stuck on 3rd and 18 or 2nd and 18 because of a sack. So, you have to be careful about that. It's an odd game, as Steve suggested, where you really, I'm sure the staff in studying the Chargers defense feels like we can throw the ball. But you also have to be careful that all of a sudden you don't have, 3 and outs and the game settles into one of those kind of weird games that you don't want to really be playing.
Well, the Bills tend to lose games like that, right? I mean, the way the Bills get beat, they lose by a single score to a team that got a lucky break on a turnover, hit a 59-yard field goal, or on a 4th and 18 on a contested ball, the DB actually helps the guy catch the ball. That kind of play is what we're talking about, where you lose you go -1 or -2 on the turnover chart and give them a couple of extra possessions with a short field, and all of a sudden you're in a dogfight and you end up one play missing it.
Yeah, and how many games this year, not last week where I believe they scored on their first possession, but how many games guys this year have all of a sudden, we're midway through the second quarter and the Bills offense hasn't really gotten started yet. You don't want to be in one of those games.
Yeah.
Right, it happened in a ton. It happened in the first Jet game, the opening day. It happened in the Jaguars game in London. It happened against the Giants. It happened against the Buccaneers, the Patriots in New England. I mean, it happens a lot. That's why a guy got fired, Greg.
And that's what you don't want to have happen in this game. But as you said, Steve, and you're 100% right, there is a balance there and a little bit of risk, But, Josh Allen is Josh Allen. He's a great quarterback. You got to trust him. I mean, if you feel the best way to attack this defense is throwing the ball, then that's what you got to do.
Well, last question for me, Greg. I mean, what do you think of this team who is back to having a win streak going for themselves? They haven't had one since weeks 2 through 4, the beginning of the season, really. They're starting to find out their identity, I believe. They've scored over 30 points in 3 out of the last 4 games. Joe Brady seems like he's doing a great job as the interim OC. You got a few games left here. Their playoff chances are looking better. What do you think of this group as they're heading into the final stretch of the regular season and really need to push through to be able to make it to the dance?
Well, I think the real positive thing, Maddie, is they're playing complementary football right now because it's not all Josh Allen right now. The defense is playing really well. I think, are they second in the league in sacks or somewhere in that range, 4th or 5th? They're in the top 5.
They're top 5, for sure.
Yeah, their D-line is playing really well. They're getting quality play on the back end, which is really important given that, there'd be players there that many would not consider great players, but they're getting quality play. So they're winning different ways. And I've always felt that's important. We know Josh Allen's a great player. We know that no one probably, wants to play Josh Allen every week because of the plays he can make. And no one maybe wants to play the Bills right now. That's what you hear a lot of people say. Boy, I don't want to play the Bills. But right now they're not in the playoffs. So, they've got to win out. And they have to, and look, if they win out and the Dolphins lose one of the other two games, they win the division. But that's looking ahead. We talked about this game tomorrow night. This can't be a game that they look past. They're not in that situation. But they played much better complementary football where it hasn't had to be Josh Allen all the time. And as great as he is and can be any given week, you can't play like that every single week.
Yeah.
Greg, good stuff. It's great talking to you. We'll look forward
thanks,
to the
Greg.
weekend. Have a great holiday weekend.
You too, guys. Really appreciate it. Thanks so much.